All right, namaste, everybody. I have Victoria here, and we're at the Stewart Cottage. We're going to do another podcast. So we'll start off with 3 questions that I always ask everybody. So the first question is, how did we meet? How do we even know each other?
So, it was Warriors Ascent.
Okay.
But I knew of you for, I feel like, quite a long time before we actually met.
All right.
And I just kept thinking, I have to meet this Carey guy. He seems awesome. Like, just, unconditional love and the way everyone talked about you. And so I think maybe it was a Warriors Ascent event or a yoga class or something that I finally, got to meet you. And I was like, whoa, this person is the bomb.
Aw, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And you've been here once before. You were here.
Yes.
When did you come here? That's about a month ago.
It was like 2 months ago, right before I left for Spain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, what are you grateful for today? Like, one thing that you're grateful for in this moment, in this breath.
I am so grateful for the connections that I have in my life, and that I got to wake up this morning and spend time with my 93-year-old grandfather and my sister.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. Really.
And so does your sister live here in Colorado?
Yeah, she's up in Frederick.
Okay. So is that where you drove from today? Frederick?
No, I drove from Broomfield.
Okay.
So a little closer.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I still don't know all the little suburbs. I know the ones that are closer to me, like Lakewood and Littleton. And like Aurora, but yeah.
So Broomfield's on the north side of Denver, and then Frederick is like halfway between Denver and Fort Collins. It basically touches the Denver Metro now.
So there's the Buckley Air Force Base. Is it close to that? I've been to there.
No, that's east in Aurora.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
So this is like I-25 if you were going from Denver to Fort Collins. So you would pass like Frederick, Dacono, Firestone. And so that's where my sister and my parents are.
So anybody watching, if you go to Fort Collins, that's like one of my favorite little towns. Don't you like it?
I haven't spent that much time there.
No, I love it.
Yeah, when I lived here, I spent all my time in Denver and Boulder, mostly.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, Boulder's really nice. Golden's really nice.
Oh, yeah.
Beautiful. Evergreen. I love Evergreen.
Well, it was so great to drive up here today.
Did you go?
Beautiful.
So did you take 25 to 70 around that way?
I went 70 to 470.
Yes.
And then came out through Morrison and Kittredge.
That is the most beautiful drive.
Yeah.
The way the rocks are forming and everything through the canyons.
And you have the curve of the road, and so you're just kind of flowing with it, and I was just playing some music and kind of jamming out.
Yeah, it's I always encourage people to take that route. That is my favorite route through Morrison. So the third question is, who has been the most positive influence in your life or mentor? And it doesn't have to be just one person, it can be multiple people.
So I at this point in my life, I feel like I have developed the ability to see mentorship in everyone. So when I encounter someone, I look for, what can I learn from this person? Sometimes I learn things that I don't want in my life, and sometimes I learn things that I do, and then sometimes I'm just in awe of the wisdom that's offered to me by individuals that I meet on the street. But some core people that have really affected my life, my Aunt Dodie, who lives in Broomfield.
Okay.
She is just such a strong, wonderful, patient woman who has this deep love in her heart for caring for other people. And so I've always really looked up to that. Right. And kind of, my younger 20s, I was living with them and I tried to emulate that a lot. I really paid attention to the love that she gave me and how one day that's the love that I will be better able to give to other people. And she's so wise. So wise. I just absolutely adore her. And then Brene Brown is... I
get that one.
Yeah. TEDx. And she has a slew of books, right?
Right.
I kind of call her my, my human spirit animal.
I get that,
because when she talks, no matter how many times I've listened to the Vulnerability TED Talk over and over, I always get something new out of it. And it just really lines up with my values and what I hope to do in the world around me and be and help other people be. So she's definitely a really important spirit animal for me. Like maybe one day I can meet her and we can, make a video together.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Are you from Colorado? Where are you from?
Well, so it's kind of a bit of a long story, but
we have time.
So my dad is a pastor, so we
Okay.
moved from church to church growing up. So I was born in Iowa, then we moved to New Orleans, then we were in southeast Montana, then we went back to northeast Iowa, and from northeast Iowa we went to like central east Iowa.
Okay.
And that's where I graduated high school. And
Where'd you go? What school?
North Cedar Knights, woo!
Awesome.
Um,
What's the mascot?
It's a knight.
Is it
Yeah,
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
the North Cedar Knights. Purple
Wow.
and teal and silver. Actually, I think they got rid of one of the colors now.
How many were in your graduating class?
67, I think.
Wow, it's big.
Yeah. Not that big. I think my brother's class, my baby brother's class was like the smallest graduating class that they had for a long time. It's
Wow.
like 40 something or whatever.
Wow.
So, small farming communities, 4 different Maine towns that all came together in a school district. So I was there for all of high school. And then when I graduated, I was like, I can't do corn.
Right.
I gotta get out of Iowa. So I actually moved here to Colorado and started university at CU Boulder.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I was here for 9 years.
Wow, that's a long time.
Before going back to the Midwest.
That's crazy. How did you end up in Kansas City?
So I so I have PTSD, and
Okay.
when my PTSD got really bad and I wasn't really doing anything about it, not acknowledging it, I moved back to Iowa to be with my parents, who are still
Okay.
there. And after being in Iowa about a year, I had gone through a program, a holistic program, week-long, that helped me learn about my PTSD and how to approach it in different ways. And I finally was able to give myself some permission to do something really different. Like,
Okay.
I'd been struggling with thoughts of suicide. I'd been on medication for a while. I was seeing a therapist, but it was a really rocky road. And so I had gone back to Iowa from this class, and like 2 weeks later, I quit my job. I gave him 8 weeks notice, and I quit my job, and like went to give up my apartment, ended my lease, all of this stuff, like got rid of a ton of stuff, put it in storage, and I basically moved into my car in June of 2015.
Okay.
And I started just driving around the United States, visiting people that I knew.
Wow.
And so like I did a whole Northeast tour, which I'd never been to New York City. I'd never been to Philadelphia.
So you did car life.
So I did car life instead of van life. Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes I would camp. Sometimes I would end up sleeping in my car or get a hotel room. Like I had very small income. But thankfully I was in school online with the GI Bill, so I was getting a living stipend
Okay.
every month for that. And so I kept going back to Kansas City because I knew people in Kansas City.
Right.
And so finally, after 7 months, I was like, okay, I want to settle for a little bit.
Right.
I want to just kind of try an area out. Like I visited all of these places to kind of just see what the atmosphere was. And my thoughts kept going back to Kansas City. And I kind of joked for a while, I'm eventually going to move to Kansas City because I was doing disaster relief with Team Rubicon.
Okay.
And they were based there in the Midwest. Like that's where we keep our trailer with all the equipment. And so I knew a lot of people there. And so I leap of faith, New Year's of 2016, I moved down there, stayed with a friend for a few weeks while I looked for an apartment. And the day that I picked up my keys for the apartment, I actually took off for 2 weeks in St. Louis to do disaster relief. So the first 2 weeks I lived in Kansas City, I was actually in St. Louis.
That's awesome.
I wasn't even there. So now I've been there for almost 4 years.
So when did you go? Do you remember when you went through Warriors Ascent when we met?
Well, so I had gone through a program prior to Warriors Ascent called Save a Warrior.
Okay.
And then when Warriors Ascent launched in November of 15, their first class was a female class.
Okay.
And so I knew Adam and Jay,
Right.
and they invited me to come down and help mentor that class. So I was kind of around since the beginning.
Okay, so I met you then shortly probably after that.
It was probably the spring of 2016
Yeah.
with one of the classes. Yeah.
So, that's amazing.
So we've known each other for almost 4 years too.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's gone by so fast. So, when did you serve in the military?
So I joined right after I graduated high school in 2005. I joined
Okay.
the Navy Reserves.
Okay.
Because I had a 10-year plan.
Okay.
And so the only thing that fit into going to university at CU Boulder was joining the reserves. And then I deployed to Iraq in 2009
Okay.
and was there the entire year until January of 2010. And then in 2012, I deployed to Afghanistan
Okay.
and came back at the beginning of 2013. And then I got out of the reserves like 3 years ago. So like
Okay.
2017, I think, was when my contract ended. So my only active time was when I was in Iraq and
Right.
Afghanistan. I've been wanting to go active duty before Iraq, but afterwards I kind of was a little bit bitter and a little bit broken, but I didn't realize that for a number of years. But it kind of made me who I am, both the good and the bad.
Do you want to share any of your experience from being overseas?
Yeah. So in Iraq, I was doing detainee operations. So by trade, I was a logistics specialist in the Navy, former storekeeper, which is the old school word, and then they changed things.
Right.
You know, they like to get fancy. And so what they were doing during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars is they were taking sailors and they were loaning them to the Army, training them to do detainee operations, and then sending them over. And a lot of people don't know the term detainee operations. It's the more Geneva Convention, not been to see a judge and convicted yet term for prisoners of war.
Right.
So we would detain individuals, and they would be placed in a detainment facility, and we would have to keep an eye on them, and then they would go through the judicial process to determine if they were guilty or not guilty. So that's what I was doing in Iraq. And it's the worst kind of tour ever, because mostly you're just sitting there watching people, making sure that they get fed. And you don't know if these people that you're watching are the worst of the worst or are not the worst of the worst. So they're just in general being over there, regardless of any position.
Right.
High stress environment. You never know when something's, going to happen.
That's right.
We were always on alert.
Unexpected, yeah.
Yeah, always on alert for people escaping, or were we going to get mortared? We were always doing drills. So that gave me a heightened sense of awareness for a really long time, which part of the reason that led to the PTSD was just having such high adrenaline levels, being always on alert for a year of my life. And then, unfortunately, I went through some instances with my fellow sailors that weren't so great for me, and really hurt me at so much deeper, and so caused that already heightened adrenaline level to get worse. And I look back at it and I think we were all just in a really shitty situation.
Absolutely.
And just because people did things that hurt me, that mocked me, that belittled me, that undermined my value as a human being, as a sailor in a war environment, I now have learned compassion for them, but for the longest time it was a lot of pain, a lot of anguish, because these were the people that were supposed to have my back.
Right.
And I didn't feel safe with them because I kept getting propositioned for intimate relations, and I kept hearing things people said about not me as like the mental me, but about my body. Rumors about how I'm sleeping with whole platoons of army. Like, it was just a really degrading time for me. And and then there's I'm still struggling with the moral implications of having been of our country having been in Iraq.
Absolutely.
And what that looks like. And so there were so many moving pieces that kind of built into what caused my PTSD, that here a decade later I'm still having to process and work through. I'm still taking medication to help me be able to process and work through those things. And it breaks when I think about it and I hear about kind of the stuff still happening within the military and outside of the military. It breaks my heart, because who I've always been is I don't understand. I've always just wanted to be kind. And help people and love people. And so it's hard for me to really understand how so many people who are basically in theory guaranteed to be kind to you, help you, love you in some way, in camaraderie, in brotherhood, sisterhood. Maybe your elk are back.
Hey. We don't stop recording, just so you know.
Welcome to Dog Life.
Exactly.
But they just knew that I was getting emotional and maybe needed a moment.
Ruffles.
But Yeah, I mean, it just kind of breaks my heart. And still, like, when I see all these things that have been happening lately with...
That haven't stopped.
Yeah, it hasn't stopped. And with the mass shooting, so much of defensiveness and anger and a lack of connection that makes us feel valuable. And so I can look back and I can see that, and I've been able to learn how to be compassionate and see that in those interactions at the same time as it's okay for me to still feel hurt.
Absolutely.
Because it doesn't negate understanding the way that somebody is or what led them to something doesn't negate the fact that I was injured. It just helps me understand it better so that I can process through it.
I think, as well as I know you and you know me, that we have a servant heart, right? Yeah. And it's in our DNA to serve our country, and now we serve our communities. But it's tough being over there. It was so tough for me going over there multiple times because I couldn't really justify the purpose of that war. I couldn't really see all those innocent lives every single time I'm over there, right? And be accountable for that. So I think it's very difficult on our part too, because at one hand we're doing what we feel is our due diligence to serve our country, but when you're actually on the ground over there and you're seeing the torture and you're seeing the innocent lives and you're seeing all this trauma that's not really justified, it's really tough for you to say, well, this really isn't purposeful. This really, and for me it was tough because when you would see stuff with the kids, I would always place my kids, I'd go home at night, and that's all I imagined every single night over and over is, what if my kids had to go through this same type of trauma in this same area? So I completely, totally understand and emphasize what you're going through. So you went over there, I guess you went to Afghanistan, and then you went...
I went to Iraq first and then Afghanistan second. Yeah.
And was that the same? Did you do the same type of duty when you were over there both times?
No. So in Afghanistan, I was actually doing logistics.
Okay.
We were working on base closures because, in theory, we were leaving Afghanistan.
Okay.
Which the media sometimes tells you we're not in Afghanistan, but then we kind of still are.
Absolutely.
And I think they've had to rebuild some of those bases that I helped
close.
Yeah,
they reopened them. That's typical.
Yeah. So I was kind of the glorified junk man.
Okay.
So I was in RC East, the eastern portion of the country against Afghanistan, and I would go to a base. It would be, so initially I actually stayed in Bagram, and other teams would go to the bases, and then they would have contractors who would buy the scrap from us, and then those contractors would come to Bagram and they would pay us. And so during my time there, which I think is kind of a cool fact, I was able to put $5 million back into the National Treasury.
That's awesome.
I mean, it doesn't make a dent,
right.
But it's still kind of
you
cool
did your part,
to say hey, I was able to do something with this. Right. And more importantly, we looked at stuff and said, is this still usable?
Right.
And if it was still usable, we put it back into the supply system. So that way we were trying to be kind of ethically responsible with our money and reuse
they
stuff.
They learned
that
from
was
the Gulf War because we just buried the stuff in the sand.
Yeah.
We just left it over there and we don't care. We're out of here. Gone. So
And so throughout the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, they had the dermo disposition remediation. I'm going to screw it up, so I'm not even going to try. But basically now they call it disposition services. And it focuses on properly reusing stuff or selling it off as scrap metal, or brass casings we can get more money for that, selling that off as scrap metal, things like that. So it's a little bit more of a responsible aspect to how are we dealing with all of all this money we spent on these wars. But we couldn't in Iraq they sent a lot of stuff home. In Afghanistan we weren't able to access ships to send stuff home. And the Pakistani border was closed to us at the time. So we literally, if it couldn't be reused in country, it would get cut up, and then we would sell it as scrap metal and stuff like that. But the last couple of months, I got to travel around RCs a little bit and do that. And so it was kind of, maybe I'm a little nerdy. I mean, okay, I am a little nerdy. It's not a maybe.
No, you are.
I'm
I'm gonna test you are. Yeah.
But it was kind of really cool to get to go through all of this stuff and be like, oh wow, look at how this works or this works, and then be able to clean up these bases and stuff like that. And it's actually kind of a telltale for now when I'm stressed out and I need to help myself calm down and meditate, be mindful a little bit. I like to clean. So, the other day, I cleaned my parents' house.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they were like, why are you cleaning the house? And I was like, I've just missed it these last
Right.
couple of months, and I just need to like kind of zone out for a little bit. So I'm gonna wash your dishes. I'm gonna do your laundry. I'm gonna scrub this area, like, you know. And so kind of telltale for like now how I manage my stuff. That
Well,
like
if
that
you-
was enjoyable.
If you want to come stay with me for a week or two, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to claim it. You can just, you know, come. You can come hang out in the hot tub or the sauna. So I noticed this tattoo here. I remember when you
Oh,
got
yeah.
this. Are
Yeah.
you still part?
It's like
of-
I'm still a part of Team Rubicon.
Okay.
Yes. So if you remember, Team Rubicon is a veteran-based disaster relief organization. That majority of the members are veteran and first responders, but it's not closed to other individuals who know how to work in a disaster environment. And so it's been actually like 6 years this week since I joined Team Rubicon.
Wow.
And they were a big part of me accessing the programs I access for my mental health, because the people in the organization just really kind of embrace you, whoever
Right.
you are. Like that was when I first met them, the reason I was stuck is because, or not stuck, but the reason I was sold on it was because I'd been going through all of this struggle with my PTSD and I wasn't getting treatment. And I was actually still here in Colorado, and I went up to Longmont to help with the flooding in Lyons in 2013. And at the end of the day, we were sitting around having beers, and people were sharing stories, and it was kind of like a Me Too, like, you know, like I shared some things that I hadn't really shared.
Right.
And they were like, cool, we get it.
Yeah, they
Like,
accepted you.
They accepted
There
me.
wasn't judgment.
There wasn't judgment. No. It was
And it's probably the
beautiful.
first time, I'm guessing,
Yeah. Yeah.
in a long time.
Yeah. Like I was not dealing with anything. Like
Right.
I'd been drinking my way through it. I'd been partying through it. I'd been going to school religiously and reading textbooks through it. Like I even went back to Afghanistan to get through it, which is not a great idea. I
No.
don't recommend like putting yourself in a potentially traumatic situation to like
No.
deal with trauma. But I wasn't acknowledging any of that, despite doctors saying, "Hey,
Right.
maybe you should take this
This
test
time,
for
right.
PTSD." And it still took like another, 6 months or so for me to fully start accessing what I needed to access. But these people supported me through it, and the people in the organization have saved my life so many times, because in my darkest moments when I'm laying on the floor with a bottle of pills in one hand and a bottle
Right.
of wine in the other, and I'm thinking, is this what I should do? I suddenly would get a text message from one of them, like my friend Blomgren.
Serendipitous.
Yeah, very serendipitous. And he would be like, I just felt like I needed to hear from you. And I think that they maybe, this group of friends, I would say something to one person and they would kind of go to the others and be like, I'm a little worried.
Right.
And so then they would all just go ahead and check in on me. But that was what I needed. Like, and I wouldn't take phone calls, but I would respond to text messages, because I just didn't understand how to feel what I was feeling
Right, and
out loud
why.
to other people and in a safe way.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now mostly what I've been doing for the last year and a half with Team Rubicon is teaching applied suicide intervention skills training, which is summarized as suicide intervention.
Okay.
So it's a bystander class, 2 days, where I help individuals learn how to talk about suicide, ask if someone is having thoughts of suicide so that you really know what you're talking about. Then kind of just listen.
Right.
Hear what brought this person to this place. Whether they're, in immediate danger with that bottle of pills in their hand and a bottle of alcohol, or maybe they're just struggling and they've come to you and you can kind of see that maybe this is what's going on. How do we have the conversation through different situations? And then how do we help them we use the term safe for now.
Okay.
So the idea is that if I'm a bystander, I'm not a clinician. I'm not a psychiatrist, a therapist, anything like that. So I am a bystander. So I can't do therapy on you.
Right.
But I can sure as heck be really direct and ask if you're having thoughts of suicide. And then I can shut up and listen.
Right.
And I can support. And I can listen for those things that help you connect to life. Like maybe your dogs are super important to you, right? I know your dogs are super important to you. And so it can be something that might seem little, but it's something that gives you a spark. I call it a spark of life. Something that helps you see that there might be another option. And then how do I help you access other resources? How do I get you to a safe place? Maybe we need to put down the alcohol and switch to water.
Right.
Maybe we need to go to the emergency room. I mean, it's not always like a 911 situation when it comes to suicide, thoughts of suicide, but through the class, you start to understand what are the different options to help somebody. So maybe a lot of times I feel like I talk to people at night. It's always the worst when it's dark, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually they say, I kind of feel better, like, because you've listened to me, and, you know, I've realized these things, and my family's important. Or in Team Rubicon, a lot, it's Team Rubicon's important, going out and helping people in disasters. And then they say, I think I'm going to go to bed. And I'll be like, okay, are you sure that, you know, you just want to go to bed? And they're like, yeah, I want to go to bed. And then I say, can I call you in the morning?
Right.
You know? Or if someone's close by, hey, you want to come sleep at my place?
Right.
You know, like, what can we do to help people feel safe in that moment? And then follow up with them later to help them connect with more stuff, or connect to different organizations that have resources and things like that.
So one of my phrases is I say that with exposure, you're granted understanding, right? Because without exposure to whatever trauma or whatever experience is, you're not going to understand it. And with that understanding is granted enlightenment. Mm-hmm. So I think, you know, people that have suffered through any type of trauma, but then maybe the regret or the shame, the guilt that's occurring. I mean, the predominant reason why we attempt or commit suicide is we've lost hope, right, for ourselves. And so I definitely commend you for doing this program. I'm excited about what you've got going on next year as you venture out. And so if anybody's watching this, I know Victoria will probably put some information on there, links to reach out to her, because she's going to be able to offer this type of program and this type of training to a variety of different communities. Yeah. And I'm going to do my due diligence to work with her as well. Yeah. Next year. It's going to be a really good year.
Yeah, it's going to be a good year.
I mean, we've had, I want to say, an alarming rate of 60,000 veterans have committed suicide over the last...
Yeah, I'm not sure what the statistic right now is.
It's a lot.
But for the longest time, it was 20 veterans a day. Right. And I love my veteran community. I was also in EMS for a while, so I'm also part of the first responder community. And the first responder, EMS, fire, and police also really struggle with suicide as an epidemic in the community, because there's so much trauma, so much struggle that there's not a place to deal with that all the time. And but in the United States, on average, 125 people suicide every day, and that's across all demographics. And it's just such a tragic thing. But so the statistic is you think, okay, about 44,000 people suicide in the United States a year. So that means that they have completed their suicide, and they're no longer living. And but they say on average 5% of the population at any given time is having thoughts of suicide. Wow. It might be the only thought they ever have in their life, or it might be an ongoing struggle, which for me, it is an ongoing struggle. And despite that, I'm still able to continue operating, and it's not the end of my world, even though I do have moments where it does feel like the end of my world. And that's where I have to lean into the community and lean into the things that I teach other people for myself as well.
Two of the things that have helped me, of course, is, you know, mindfulness, meditation, but actually getting myself connected with like yoga or organizations like Warriors Descent that hold me accountable, that I have to be there for the community, that I have to lead these classes. What are some of the things that have kind of helped you through this?
So I've also worked with Warriors Descent. I spent a long time. Look, that's how we met. Working with them as a mentor. And one of the things that I started to realize was the necessity of finding balance between serving other people, which does help fill me up, does help connect me, and allows me to pass on the wisdom, the tools, the knowledge that have been granted to me through my own journey, with also making sure I take care of myself. And so when I would go work with a Warrior Descent class, I would mean that the week beforehand and the week afterwards, I would have to increase the things that I did to take care of myself, because while in that place of serving other people, I'm not going to be able to fully deal with my own emotions, because in a class of 12 people, I'm having to help support 12 people plus the mentors and, you know, all these different things. And Team Rubicon is also really about finding continued service and serving other people and how it helps us as individuals. And it's interesting. I've done so many different programs, and I've been involved in so many different nonprofit organizations that serve veterans and first responders. And it always comes down to like, where's my balance?
Right.
Because I have exhausted myself. I've burnt myself out. And then I'm forced to take a step back. But when I can when I can see it coming,
right.
and so I can take a step back early enough and find that
Be
balance.
More proactive.
Proactive.
Yeah.
Yes. Then I'm not only better able to love myself and connect with myself, but I'm better able to love and connect with other people.
That's true.
And honestly, I can't ever. There's like, if you have a problem, I can't solve your problem for you.
Right.
Right. But what I can do is I can support you. I can offer what I know, and I could offer resources I might know. And then you're going to have to do the processing.
Right.
And you're going to have to find your balance. And you're going to have to figure out which self-care things work for you. And that is going to be what helps you solve your problem. So I'm here as part of your community, but I'm not your magic wand.
Right.
Yeah. And so for a while, I think I looked at other people as my magic wand.
To rescue
right?
you, to save you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or if I could run into a disaster environment after a flood and I could muck out homes and and be there for homeowners as they cry on my shoulder and support these communities on the worst day of their life, right? That should solve all of my problems, right? Or if I can go to a week-long program and I can learn all of these new things and make a connection with people who also are learning these things, then when I return home, that should solve all of my problems, right?
But
it doesn't.
No.
Or even going to a psychiatrist and receiving medication. This medication is going to solve all of my problems. Life is not that simple.
No.
Yeah, but
not at all.
Through finding balance and service to others and service to ourselves first and foremost, then we'll be better able to serve others, and we'll be able to change the world around us in a really positive way.
Right.
Because if I'm living a life that is worth living, a kind life, a compassionate life, which means that I have to treat myself kindly. I have to treat myself compassionately. I have to say my shoulder really hurts right now.
Right.
So I'm not going to walk 10 kilometers today, which is I had to do when I was in Spain recently. Then, finding that balance then allowed me to interact with people in a different way.
So you had some really good connections with Team Rubicon.
Yeah.
Obviously. Made some really great friends. I've heard nothing but great things about that organization.
I love them so much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And they would come to yoga. They always love like the yin deep stretch meditation ones.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about like a couple months ago, you sold a bunch of stuff. You sold your car. I was like, what is she doing? What's going on?
Yeah.
And then you show up here, and then you go to Spain. So what prompted all this?
So last year, for my mom's 60th birthday, don't tell her I said that. For my mom's birthday last year,
right.
She wanted to walk from Sarria, Spain, to Santiago de Compostela, Spain, which is the final portion of the Camino de Santiago Francés, which is an old Catholic pilgrimage.
Okay.
And it's not just for Catholics. We're Lutheran, in fact.
Are you Catholic?
I'm not Catholic.
Okay.
But a lot of people do it for spiritual reasons, and some people just do it for athletic endurance reasons.
Gotcha. That makes sense, yeah.
So when I was on the trail last year, there were these beautiful evergreen trees all around me. And I found this peace in myself that I had not found here in the States. Like, I kept looking for this place where I was just really okay with me. And I went on this trail to support my mom, and my sister came, my aunt came, and my cousin came. And my mom said at the beginning, I know you're here to support me, but I want you guys to have your own journey here. And my mom is also an incredible mentor in my life. I'm going to grow up to be her one day. But she was just very supportive of us having our own journey while she had her own journey on the trail. So it was 112 kilometers, about 75 miles that we walked last year. And I fell in love with this trail, with who I was on the trail. And I'd met some people who said, oh, well, the Camino de Santiago Francés starts in Saint-Jean-Pied-de-Port, France, which is just over the Spanish border in the Pyrenees Mountains. And it's a total of 779 kilometers, roughly 480 miles, to Santiago de Compostela. So this is like the whole official Camino de Santiago Francés.
From start to finish.
From start to finish. And they told me about this, and I was like, oh my gosh, this sounds great. And they kind of described it as the hero's journey, where you go through like physical challenges, mental challenges, and then spiritual challenges, and then there's a redemption at the end, and you come back with some wisdom, some elixir to life. And I love the hero's journey model. And so I was like, oh, this just touches my heart and my soul. And so I kind of started looking at flights when I came back, like within like the month. I was like, how do I get back to Spain? How do I get back to Spain? And then in the beginning of this calendar year, I just was really having a hard time. I don't know if it was the weather that really kind of altered my coping skills, but I was just really struggling with my PTSD. My anxiety was really high.
Me too.
I felt like I was really losing it.
Me too.
And one night I couldn't sleep because I get these nightmares. And so I couldn't sleep because I'd had these horrible nightmares the night before, and I just couldn't bring myself to lay down and go to sleep because I didn't want to go back to that really horrific place, that really hard place. And so about 5 a.m. in the morning, on a February morning, I had gone online and I'd looked for flights to get me back to Europe. And for $400 round trip to Heathrow, I booked a flight with 8 weeks between the going and coming back. And
out of Denver,
yes, because it was $400 round trip out of Denver versus $800 out of Kansas City.
I know, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, and the bonus is that my parents are here, so I was able to come and visit before and after, obviously. And it's more important to me now, even now as I get older, to spend more time with my family.
Right.
And so then I started like planning, kind of like, okay, how am I going to do this? And I started like, instead of buying money to do painting and all of these, art projects that I've been doing, I started socking money away so that I would have funds to do 8 weeks on the Camino. Most people take about 30 to 40 days, but I gave myself 60. And so it lined up with the end of my lease. So I got rid of a bunch of stuff, put a bunch of stuff into storage, brought some stuff like my painting supplies to my parents, that it was in a climate controlled environment, and took off for Spain. I quit my job because I was working for Starbucks and you could only take 30 days leave. But I'll be going back in a month or so. They're going through all the paperwork process again right now. And my store is just incredible. Like, they were so supportive of this and really excited for me. And so it was kind of scary, though, because I left my job. I gave up my apartment. And then when I got here to Denver, I thought, what do I do with this car? And I was like, I don't want to deal with it. So I sold my car, which was quite beat up because of an accident I got in. And but I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna... and so I
have a question.
Yeah.
Was that the car that during a yoga studio you thought somebody had broken into your car or something?
No. This was the car after that car.
Can you remind me that story real quick? I know we're diverting, but you thought somebody had broken into your car.
Yeah. So
after yoga.
So I'd been given this 1995 something.
Right.
It was a very old car. When my previous car had broken down, I got it from a program called Cars for Heroes.
Okay.
And the seatbelt didn't retract all the way. Just kind of old. It gets stretched out. And I'd had several issues mechanically with the car, and so it was already stressing me out. And then I came to yoga at my KC one night, and I parked in the back lot, and the seatbelt didn't go all the way back in. It got stuck in the door, and I think I was maybe running late.
Right.
So I'd slammed the door behind me, assuming it closed. And an hour later, after class, when I came back out, here my door was ajar.
Right.
And it was funny because my friend had come to class with me that night.
That's right.
And her car had parked next to me, and she also thought my door had closed all the way. So we walked back out to the parking lot, and we're like, oh no. Because that area of town in Kansas City is still up and coming, and so there's still some risk of things. And I think I'd left my phone plugged in the car, and my whole life was in this vehicle. And it turned out, and I didn't realize why the door was open. So I get in the car, and I'm like, okay, I check all my stuff's there. I'm like, oh, thank goodness. I'm like, why is my door open? So I go to pull the door closed, and it rebounds, and that's when I realized that the seatbelt was in the door, and that's why it hadn't closed. Gotcha. So nobody had broken into my car, but I was instantaneously freaking out because thinking somebody had broken into my car, and oh my gosh. And so I was a lot more careful after that with making sure that the seatbelt was inside the car when I closed it.
So you sold your car.
So I sold my car.
Sold a bunch of stuff.
Put a bunch of stuff in storage.
You realize your life is a lot like mine a year ago.
Yeah.
Like, we sold our house.
Yeah.
And we hopped in a van and lived in a van for 6 months, not knowing where we were going to end up.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of, when I went to Spain, I really didn't have, I had thoughts of maybe what I would get out of it, but I didn't have a whole lot of expectations. I was just going to go to France, and then I was going to walk to the other side of Spain, and there's yellow arrows that mark the pathway.
Okay.
And so I was just, all I knew is that I just have to get there, and I'm going to follow these yellow arrows, and I'll figure out the rest of it. And, you know, U.S. cell phones, it's really expensive to use them overseas,
Yes.
so I was going to be really off-grid unless I could get Wi-Fi, which some places I could, some places I couldn't. And so it was a huge difference. I was carrying everything in a backpack about this big.
Wow.
That I needed for the whole time I was out there. So like 2.5 changes of clothes. In fact, I'm wearing one of the sets of clothes today.
I love it.
Because I apparently am so in love with the clothes I wore that despite having other options,
Right.
I don't want them.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll end up simplifying my wardrobe after
Even
this.
more, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it is a lot like what you did, kind of just taking off and just really exploring. So I call myself a wanderer.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a website, a blog, and my Instagram and a Facebook page now even called Wanderer's Guidebook.
Awesome.
And so I'm working now that I'm back on starting to post my journal from the time in Spain.
Perfect.
So that people can go and
we'll
read
put
it.
links in this,
Awesome.
so anybody wants to,
That'd be
any of
great.
that contact information.
That'd
right?
be perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Because I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to hear your thoughts on everything that I'm doing and even your stories. I mean, hearing other people's stories about all these different things that we're talking about, because we're all our own story.
Right.
And so it's just so cool to see how other people react in similar situations, or how maybe they feel the same things, maybe a hashtag Me Too on some of this.
Right.
Which I don't think I've told you was a really interesting part of the trail. I met these people from all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And some spoke English well, some didn't speak English at all, but it just kind of varied a little bit. I speak a little bit of Spanish, but I kept hearing these stories from people from all over Europe, from Asia, from all these different places, their own stories about struggle with trauma and with thoughts of suicide and with mental health not being a focus in their community, and the need for mental health to be a focus in their community, and struggles with politics, with caustic societies and environments that hurt us. And so we're no different than anyone else in the world.
Years ago, I would do what's called free will. I'd bike across Oklahoma. Usually start like in Texas, bike up into like Kansas or Arkansas or something like that. And what I noticed is on this journey, in this path, I would see a lot of the same people at the same times throughout the day. You know, I'd get up before sunrise, I'd go eat, I'd get on my bike, and I'd head out, and I'd see a lot of the people. And then I'd see the same people, like we would put our tents up away from all the big partiers, right? Because we wanted to be more secluded and go to bed early. And I realized a lot about myself. Tell me a little bit about that on your journey. Were you able to like have these conversations with these people? Did you see the same people multiple days on your trip?
Yeah.
On the journey?
So when I started by myself. No one went with me. But they say that when you're on the Camino, you're never alone.
Right.
Or at least you're never alone for long. Because, so there's a saying, Buen Camino, which means good way.
Okay.
And that's what you would greet other pilgrims with. And we had these shells.
Okay.
Were the symbol of the pilgrimage, and we would have like the actual seashell hanging on our bag or around our neck. So you would be able to see other pilgrims. Plus, they would everyone would be packing their own stuff. So you could kind of tell the pilgrim by like, you know, the slow pace of blistered feet. Anyway, so you would meet people and you would say Buen Camino, and sometimes the Buen Camino would lead to where are you from?
Right.
And then sometimes it would lead to why are you here on the Camino? And we kind of bypassed all of the small chit chat. Occasionally it was Buen Camino, nice weather we're having, or really crummy weather we're having, and then you would go on your way. But a lot of times you would, because we would see people consistently like that, you would end up walking with them, maybe for a day. Some people I walked with for several days. And then at one point, like, we'd ended up split into two groups, and we, not intentionally, the Camino brought us back together because we'd taken different routes came back together. And so we would say, like, the Camino provides what you need. And in the form of connection, it really does. Like, I've always looked for magic in my life, and there are these monuments or these sacred moments in Catholicism on the trail that, like, people, like, leave things behind or whatever. And I kind of would get frustrated because I wouldn't feel anything at those. And I started to realize that the magic was not in the ceremonies or in the places that I was seeing or walking through the cathedral or seeing the castle. It was the magic of walking with a man from Germany, a woman from Poland, a man from Italy, and singing The Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
Like,
that's hilarious.
That was the magic.
From Kansas, and I'm from Kansas City. Yeah.
So I live on the Missouri side, but people don't understand the geography exactly. So
they don't.
Yeah, so we just went with
Kansas.
it. They hear Kansas City, they go with Kansas, and the only thing they know about Kansas is The Wizard of Oz.
Right.
But it was 4 of us. It was great. We each assigned oh, I'm the Cowardly Lion or whatever, and I was like, I'm the Scarecrow. If I only had a brain. And so we would just go down the trail laughing and walking. And so we were kind of together for several days. And then more people joined our group. And some people had to go home. And because a lot of people in Europe, they do it in stages. Like they have their week or 2 weeks vacation. They do a part of it.
That makes complete sense.
Go home next year, come back to the next part. But it was so great getting to spend all this extra time with people because we would just get to know each other so well. And Antonio from Italy, he would, when things were really rough, he would say, Victoria, look at how beautiful this is. And he actually messaged me that on WhatsApp the other day because I checked in on him to see how he was doing.
That was my next question. Did you establish any friends or relationships that you were going to continue?
Oh my gosh, so many. I think maybe it was like collecting Pokemon. I got one from every country in Europe. No. So there's definitely several people from different countries that I will stay in touch with, and if I go back to Europe, maybe swing through their neck of the woods and say, hey, how are you doing? Show me what your food's like, or we're in Germany, what's the best beer? All the beer is the best beer.
Of course, every village. Yeah.
Don't ask a German if they want another beer. The answer is always yes, and they just look at you if you ask the question.
That's true.
Yeah, but friends from all over the world, and actually more friends that weren't American than were American, just because there were more non-Americans on the trail.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
The accessibility.
The very last section that we had done last year, there were a lot of Americans on that because it makes for a really easy week-long vacation to come out and you can get a guide and stuff like that. It's much, much busier because in order to get the Compostela, the completion certificate from the Catholic Church, you have to walk a minimum of 100 kilometers. So your starting place is Sarria.
Gotcha.
Yeah. But it was... Yeah, I have people all over the world now that I'm on social media with. I have their phone numbers. I have WhatsApp.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, I definitely hope we stay in touch. And then there's the people that I didn't swap any contact information with, but I'll never forget them. I kept running into this retired British Army colonel and his wife throughout the last week, and it was really cool to get to spend some time and chat with them and hear some perspectives of a veteran from another country, and an officer at that. I mean, when his wife first said he was a colonel, I was like, oh, I'm sorry, you don't want to talk to me, I'm enlisted. The old joke about enlisted versus officer. But it was really interesting because we didn't swap any information, and the Camino kept bringing us back together. And just knowing that him and his wife were there on the trail, in kindred spirits, really... it was like they were always walking with me, even though we weren't connected. So I'll never, that couple, I will never forget, Neil and April.
You realize the things that you have in common with people in other parts of the world.
Yeah. Right?
As you go through this journey, what did you learn about yourself?
So I learned that... My ego is I need to work on humility, I guess would be the nicer way to put it, because you climb a really big mountain the first day out of San John, and I got a blister within the first 4 hours, a really bad one on the back of my heel, that forced me to slow down and also not think that I could conquer this mountain, because I've lived in Colorado, I've hiked the Rockies, this is nothing, this is only 3,000 feet versus 10,000 feet at Hans Peak.
Right.
And so the Camino kind of right off the bat was like, you need to check yourself. And so I had to really look at myself physically and say, okay, maybe I haven't climbed enough mountains for this first day. So how am I going to pace myself? So just the basic self-care of making sure I ate food and drank more water was really important, because the couple of times I didn't, so understanding that these are my body's needs. At the end of the day, I need to cover my feet in ibuprofen cream. Right. And then there's the mental aspect of myself. So, and the mental aspect deals a lot with the traumas that have come before. Even some of my physical stuff, like my shoulder injury, deals with the traumas that have come before. And the first week or two, I was just really physically exhausted. And so my mind was kind of like, it was off to the side talking to sheep. Right. Like as I'd pass them, or like, there were horses with cowbells on, so I'm going to call them horse bells. And that's what my mind was doing during this time, because my body was trying to get acclimated. But once my body got acclimated, my mind started to become active. And it was really interesting, the things that triggered me. So when I was in Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of the products used there were from Europe. Yeah. So I would run into products that like smells or
bring up a memory.
Yeah, that would bring up a memory. And it was just something that you would think would be really innocuous, but because it took me back there. Right. I remember a gravel parking lot when the sun was hitting it full force, and the smell of that. And I don't like the smell of that. Like it really takes me back to all the gravel and sand in Iraq and things. And so but I had to walk through this in order to get to the only albergue that was available. And, so I know I can do it, but I was able to acknowledge to my mind and process through that, okay, this isn't great. So there's some of the smaller things like that. And then dealing with some of the bigger things, like the fact that I didn't feel like anyone had my back over there.
Not support,
and seeing it from a different perspective. The medical issues that have come out of it. And my struggle. I actually walked with two people who'd worked for the VA as physicians. One was the director in Ohio, I think, for a while, and they gave me some insight into their experiences with the VA, which I've had lots of struggles with the VA, and so I was able to kind of see a different perspective that allowed me to process things a little differently. And I guess in Spain they've also had, so they've had lots of issues with sexual aggression during their fiestas. If you know anything about Spain, they're all about their fiestas, right? Every other weekend, they're celebrating something. And I walked into this town one day and saw these signs that, said, we don't stand for sexual aggression. And they're having this huge party, and I didn't see anything else that told me what the party was about. So I thought for some reason they were celebrating
sex.
Like they were celebrating, like it was like almost instead of like picketing or something, they were having a celebration to prevent sexual aggression.
Oh, gotcha.
And so my mind couldn't understand what was going on, and I was really tired. I'd already walked 13 kilometers, and it was hot, and that was the town I was planning to stay in. Nothing was open. So, or what was open was jam-packed. Right. So, but there were no albergues available for me to stay in.
What's an albergue?
An albergue is a hostel available to pilgrims on the pilgrimage.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I bought some stuff at the grocery store, and I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to have to go 7 more kilometers to the next town. And I got to the edge of this town. I think it was maybe Navarrete. And there was a fountain. So in Spain, you can drink out of the fountains that are just running water most of the time. Whereas here in the States, you'd have to like triple filter it and everything, right? So there was no one else around, so I sat down next to this fountain to eat the stuff I had, and I just automatically I just started sobbing. Like I was like, my body was just heaving with sobs because I just couldn't comprehend how are they having a party to celebrate like how they're not going to be sexually aggressive. Well, when I'd calmed down at the end of the day, I Googled this because I couldn't process. I was like, yes, different cultures, but this is just so foreign. I'm like, is this not a problem here? Actually, it turns out that it was, I think maybe the Festival of San Roque or one of their saints, and the signs were because they've had such a problem with sexual aggression. From people forcing drinks to forcing kisses to forcing more. And it brought up so much of the trauma that I went through with sexual aggression. And I think I probably sat there for an hour and just sobbed. I didn't know how I was going to walk 7 more kilometers because I felt like I was just going to die. right there from the pain of all of this coming back up. And it was good later to have understanding, but in that moment, I think if I'd had the understanding, I wouldn't have been able to feel what I obviously needed to feel. Yeah.
And do you feel more healed, or that you can kind of move forward?
Yeah. It unlocked some things that I had forgotten. In my therapy, I run up against these roadblocks where I just don't know what comes next, and I don't know how to kind of scrape away whatever's blocking that. And so, and this is just one moment that was like this, and I had many moments like this with all of the different traumas I've been through.
Good.
So I think that it offered me the ability to start to acknowledge more than I was ready for before.
Right.
Like, I had the space on the trail to kind of let some of that out, but also set some good boundaries with it, which I took a ukulele with me that I didn't really know how to play, and so I learned how to play on the Camino, and that became how I would set my boundaries. When I would get physically, mentally, or spiritually exhausted, I would sit down and I would play my ukulele. And it actually became a whole thing. Like, people would talk about me and they'd see me later and they'd be like, I heard you and your ukulele. And so it was also a really great connector to the community that's around me. Like, and the first couple of weeks I was not good at connecting with people because I think I was afraid.
Right.
I was afraid of language barriers, of oversharing, of not being ready yet. And sometimes that's okay, right? Like, we need that. And then when I did start to meet people, I grew to love the people that I met. And I did have to put some effort into getting to know people, because if I was going through something myself, but the great thing about the Camino is if you're going through something, you just share what you want to share, or you tell people I'm going through something and I need space right now, or I need to walk alone. So we wouldn't always chat the whole day and walk next to each other, but we might end up catching up at lunch or the next watering point or something like that. And so it was really interesting to have this space to process myself. And I think I've always had a question about how to connect with people. Like, the people that I connect with, it always seems like, I've always said, it's accidental. Because I don't know what happens.
Right.
But I want to understand, because I want to better be able to connect with people. And so I learned a lot on the trail about connecting with myself and giving space for what I needed, and allowing that to be a part of my whole person. So it wasn't something that I needed to then take and set aside in a container. What I've gone through, it feels more now that, yes, it is an experience I went through, but I don't need to hide from it. And so my own internal shame and stigma regarding it has started to change because of what I went through with myself on the Camino.
Right. So it's like healthy boundaries. We've all had, like, a connection with one or another, and sometimes they're positive, sometimes they become toxic. And of course it's a healthy boundary, and a lot of times we just don't understand the attraction. Just because me and you are attracted to each other doesn't mean that it has to be like a sensual or a sexual attraction.
Right.
But a lot of times, because of our past or because of whatever media or whatever we've been shown, we feel like, oh, that's the direction that we need to be. It needs to be a sexual connection. Do you think has, I guess, part of that with the festival of, look, we're building awareness against sexual attraction? Do you think a lot of men have kind of lost that ability to have a healthy boundary and to kind of know where those boundaries are located, and there's probably another avenue that they need to be using for that sexual aggression that they're not, or they're not communicating that? What is your take or your thought on kind of that, and men in their portrayal of, and I understand some of it's control, just to be right?
Yeah.
That a man wants to control, manipulate, and instead of expressing a more intimate relationship, what is your take on some of that?
Well, so I feel I have an interesting take, because my response to the sexual aggression that was perpetrated, I guess, on me, was to, in response, just in my life, become more sexually aggressive. Not in a way of taking someone's control, but being the one to make the choice first, that the choice wasn't taken from me.
Right.
And so I went through a long period of sleeping around, going to bars, and hitting on people and all this stuff, and dressing up so that I would show off my body to get that kind of attention. And so from my own perspective, I have felt sexually aggressive.
Gotcha.
And I've had people who are sexually aggressive towards me. And so it's not just a men thing, but I think that a lot of our belief systems about what makes a man really leans in that direction, because it's so simple to say, like, I feel connected to you, but instead of processing this relationship, getting to know you, learning to communicate with you, I'm just going to get physical with you. And our society doesn't do a good job of teaching us to communicate well, to connect well.
Right.
And so someone needs something when they cause pain. They usually are in need of something, and they try and get that by inflicting pain on other people. And understanding that doesn't mean that I'm saying that's okay at all. But when I see people being aggressive, I always have to wonder what else is going on in their mind, because this is a simple primal fallback that is not, it's not okay.
Right.
And it tells me that there's something else not okay going on inside of their mind. And is it a simple thing to solve? Probably not. Do they need therapy? Maybe. Or maybe they just need to have a conversation with somebody where the person says, hey, you're kind of a jerk.
Right.
And you're being really inappropriate, and you really need to think about this, and hope that the person who says that to them is the right person that they listen to, so that they can start changing their ways about things. And, I'm sure that there's a lot more behind it that I don't understand, because I have my own experiences on my side of the fence, from other people's perspectives and things like that. And we're all really complicated, unique individuals. But I think that if we were better at connecting with each other and communicating with each other in a vulnerable and authentic way, then I wouldn't need to act out control or physical intimacy with people to get what I need. Because we all need, we are born with the need to have connection, to be important to somebody. But so easily in our world, so many people have been told so much that they're not important, or they're not valued, or they're not worth it, or they're not enough. And so they're trying to figure out how to get that. And I think that sexual aggression is one of the ways that comes about, whether they recognize it or not.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah. Because I feel like, and I always try to do it from that perspective, but it's tough, right? Yeah. Because we don't think in that mode or that manner, But I think part of it is, a lot of people probably are missing some intimacy, and they're thinking that that's going to solve their issue, right? With the quick sex relationship. And I see you, and I don't have any self-control at this moment. I don't have any healthy boundaries. Yeah. So what am I going to do? How am I going to behave inappropriately? Yeah. Right? It's basically... So, and it's being vulnerable. For me to say my needs aren't being met sexually, how do I get my needs met? Right? How's that process look? And maybe you're not the right person for that. Maybe you are, but it's like, you're right. I think that a lot of us have a lot of work that we need to do. How do
we navigate that social pathway? Right, of finding people who also would like to be intimate with us on different levels. I mean, as friends, we're close, and we've shared some intimacy emotionally by sharing stories, right? But that doesn't, and that allows us a level of intimacy that we both need in our lives, that we really value, right? But that doesn't lead to physical intimacy. And so when people think intimacy, they always think, okay, straight to the bedroom. We're gonna go straight to the bedroom instead of figuring out, like, what do we have in common, or like our mutual goal of putting love above all else.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, that's a really intimate topic.
Right.
Like, how are we going to show unconditional love to other people? Like, that, I mean, it kind of, makes my hair stand on it, because it is such a difficult topic, but when you can find people to talk with, it's an intimate conversation.
And there's not a lot of men that have those discussions. There's not a lot of men that are going to talk about what unconditional love means in their life, how they share that and where they find acceptance for themselves and others.
Yeah.
Right? And it goes back kind of to the ego.
And yes, and I've met a lot of men who I think understand the need for that and also feel the desire to share that kind of stuff. And what they do is they share it with the women in their lives.
Yeah.
So instead of sharing it with the men, and so many of the things I've talked about, mental health, suicide, our emotions have so many stigmas, right? And gender-based stigmas too. So we shouldn't talk about this stuff.
Right.
Or you think that other people won't approve of you talking about this stuff. But it's interesting because one of the things I've seen with men who work to be more vulnerable on these topics and more emotional outright is that it actually encourages other men. And it's the same thing for me with women. The more I talk about these things, the more I find that women are willing to talk about these things, because it says you're not bad or wrong for how you're feeling.
Right.
It says, I'm open. Like, let me be here for you.
Yeah. It reminds me of last year when I was doing the Wanderlust tour, and we're in Tremblant, Canada. And I was doing a workshop with, I think it was Mark Groves. And he did a really cool... all right, take 22.
Okay. Take 22.
Exactly.
So it's actually really funny. Maybe this will help you kind of stitch all these bits together. Because people watching right now might see me on the other side. I don't know. So electronic difficulties, right? So we're talking about struggle and we're talking about connection, all of this stuff, right? We're here to connect with each other. We're here to make this video to connect with other people. And then all of a sudden the camera stops working. Not just once, but twice now. And who knows how long it's going to last. And so a lot of people would be like, oh, maybe we shouldn't do this anymore. Like, just call it, stop it. We'll just put up what we have or whatever. We'll reformat it, or
start over again.
Or like, can we hold the same positions? This is what you were holding when the camera went off.
Right.
And and the thing is like we're trying to be really real here.
Right.
And when we're trying to be really real in our life, when a struggle happens, instead of being like, okay, we're gonna go back and we're gonna perfect this, instead you're like, I'm gonna stitch this together. And we'll just make it work. So it can be really frustrating. Like, we all really rely on technology, and it can be really, really frustrating for us. And when we're trying to connect with people, it can also be really frustrating, right? And we almost use technology as a way to like
disconnect or connect.
Yeah. So like, I can text you something mean in text message and put an LOL at the end.
Right.
And probably damage our connection a little bit, but then pretend that I didn't mean to.
Right.
And so we have all these little struggles, right, in our ability to connect with each other. And the trick with connection, which I really do feel is so important to living a whole life, is that when these struggles happen, when the camera stops working, instead of blowing up and throwing it down on the ground, maybe you stop and you take a few breaths and you troubleshoot it.
Right.
And so when you're working with someone and connecting with them and the struggle comes up, you have to stop, maybe take a few breaths. You have to troubleshoot it. You have to say, this is what I'm thinking you said. Am I right? This is what I'm feeling. What are you feeling? Right? Because we should not be invalidating how each other feels, because how I'm feeling might differ from how you're feeling. But it's this whole process of communication and understanding intention.
Absolutely.
Perception. So how do I perceive you based on previous, experiences, like you said earlier? And then what am I projecting? Like, maybe at some point in my life, I've had a very untrustworthy long-haired man.
Right.
And so I'm instead of taking you for who you are, I'm like, this guy has long hair. Yeah. He's probably super untrustworthy.
Right.
And so it puts me more on alert, but I don't have to go all the way into the don't talk to me place.
Right.
I can instead say, hey, let me learn a little bit about you. And then if I'm really struggling, I might even be vulnerable and say, hey, you kind of remind me of this person in my past. And if you're really not safe to me, I'm not going to say that to you. But you're a pretty safe person to me, so I could say to you. And I don't know that I have somebody in my past. It's just an example.
Right. No, I get that.
But where I would be like, hey, I'm kind of struggling with this, so I just need to learn a few things about you that help me out. And it's all about that connection and communication bit of things.
I think a lot of times, just from like, I've been married, I don't even know how, since 91, so whatever this year is, right? So almost 30 years,
Yeah.
right? And that's still an ongoing battle, communication. And I think a lot of times is we do build up stuff from yesterday or the last week, and a lot of times, the tempers get short or whatever, and it brings up all this stuff from the past. So I think a lot of times is not letting stuff build up, but to letting it out each and every day. I think one of the most important factors in a relationship is forgiveness. So even if you did say something mean and you said LOL, forgiving you of that circumstance, right? Like, but through that process, I still have to love you unconditionally and accept you.
Yeah.
When you have that intention going in, you could say a lot of other things, and I'm going to still love you and accept you. When you stop loving and accepting yourself or your situation, and you're allowing all of that other stuff in your environment to affect you, that also affects your relationship.
Yeah.
Right? So when you're stressed at work, or you're stressed at home, or you're stressed with your finances, all those other things, those healthy boundaries I always talk about, when you don't have those healthy boundaries, that really affects, a lot of times, your ability to communicate. So a lot of times, when you're saying that stuff to me, you're really deflecting it on the old hippie guy that was in the relationship before.
Yeah.
But I'm just getting that, right? So a lot of times, we don't even realize what we're doing. That I'm reflecting what's going on in my life to you, and you don't deserve it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not entitled to that. I need to give you respect and understanding. So it's one of the things that I've learned, and I realize that, like, forgiveness, I always say, is the big, and it's in work. If you're in a working relationship, and you and whoever your partner is that you're working with, your boss or a coworker, and they did something that upset you or triggered you, and you don't forgive them, and you come back tomorrow with resentment and frustration and anger and hate, and then they do something else that normally wouldn't upset you, but now they've piled on, because what have you done? It's truly a self-reflection within yourself. I'm not forgiving them every single day, and I'm letting all this stuff build up, and eventually it causes this whole dissension. Maybe not only within us, but within the organization. Right. And we've seen that.
We've seen that. and then all of a sudden you have a mountain to climb to try and heal yourself, and it's much easier to climb a molehill.
Right.
And so being upfront about things, which means that you have to be comfortable with yourself first.
Absolutely.
Because if I'm not comfortable with a tough topic or with saying you hurt me, then I'm not going to have this conversation. I'm going to let it build. I'm going to let things pile up on top of it. And it's probably going to end in disaster. Either you're going to fire me, or I'm going to quit, or we're no longer going to be friends.
Right.
And so the beauty is taking a risk and being vulnerable and authentic allows me to say, I've been hurt, and I want to understand where this came from.
Right.
And maybe you're like, I have no idea.
Yeah, I didn't mean it. It was something completely irrelevant. It wasn't even reflected towards you.
Yeah, and then what it allows
my stomach hurt, or I had a headache.
Right. Then what it allows us to do is it allows us to say, like, for you to say, I had no intention of hurting you. Maybe in the future in this situation, how can I approach you differently?
Right.
Or I can say to you, bravely, be brave.
Right.
I can say, I need you to not yell my name down the road when you see me. I need you to just approach and then say my name, because maybe when you yell my name, it triggers me in a way, and it has nothing to do with you. But then it sets me up for being mad at you for yelling my name, because I've had people yell my name in the past, and it usually means I'm in trouble.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we were talking a little bit before we broke down. I know we were talking about vulnerability with men.
Yeah.
And I was going to give you an example.
Yeah.
So I was at this workshop, and if you ever do yoga or do yoga events, it's 99% women, right? Mm-hmm. There's two guys in there, right? Always. It seems like that's the thing. And so we're in this deal, and so what he did was he had two. I don't know if I've told you this story before, but he had a couple. And I was like, hey, who's a couple in here? So it was a man and a woman come up, and he's like, okay, I want you guys to just keep walking until you're uncomfortable with each other. Well, they walked up and they hugged and they kissed. And so the guy walked up to the girl and goes like, I'm going to walk up to you. When I get too close, you just put your hand up, right? And so she got like super close, or he got super close, and so it's like right here, and she put her hand up. So he's like, okay, to the guy, I'm going to walk up to you, put your hand up, and just tell me when you're uncomfortable. The guy's like reaching real far, like stay away, right? but anybody that knows me knows I'm a hugger,
Yeah.
right? Well, I stood up and I'm like, I'm not going to pick anybody. I'm going to let them pick me, right? Because this is going to be a hug when they walk up to me. It's inevitable. I'm not going to stop them at any point. Ironically, this guy couldn't find anybody, so he's like, okay, you. So we meet up, and I was like, okay, do you want to go first or me go first? He goes, okay, I'll come to you. I was like, okay. So I'm just standing there. Oh, I said G-O. And now they think it's time to G-O somewhere for a W-A-L-K. I know. So I was like, okay. So he kept walking and walking. I never stopped. And then he gets really close, and I give him a hug. And he just kind of melted, and just like all of a sudden, you felt him relax and everything. And then he stopped back, and then I said, okay, I'm going to come to you. Put your hand up when you're uncomfortable. And he was like kind of, and then he just put his hand down. He goes, this is awkward for me because now I feel vulnerable. Now I feel like I'm loved and I'm accepted. He felt everything that I give people.
Yeah.
And he goes, all I needed was somebody to give that to me first. I'm not used to this. I'm not used to men giving me this kind of attention and affection,
right,
and it not being sexual. And so I think a lot of times we've perverted who we are and haven't realized who we are, but it's okay that we love and hug each other, and that there's not an alternative motive. It's not. We're talking about men and vulnerability and women and how we need to kind of express it, have healthy boundaries, and kind of what you learned on your adventure
on the Camino.
Yeah, and going forward. So we've all had unhealthy boundaries and unhealthy relationships. We'll probably have unhealthy relationships in our future, right? We've learned from the past.
We're human, aren't we?
Right. Yeah. So it's going to happen. I think it's really about a learning and a process, and I think it's about loving and accepting each other.
Yeah.
Especially each and every day, and not holding a lot of resentment.
Which is why I'm actually really excited to start this nonprofit organization in Kansas City.
Let's talk about it.
So I'm going to call it You Choose.
Okay.
Because I'm nerdy, and so it's kind of like, what's your organization called? You choose. But it also is because each of our journeys is very unique. So we're going to choose our own, in a way like the old books from like the 80s and 90s, choose your own adventure, right? So I'm building a program that offers space for individuals to come and learn new things about themselves. And they'll get those things from us sharing information, tools. Like one of my big things is how do we play as an adult, like maybe some art, some music in there. Learning how to become aware of ourselves and take good care of ourselves, deal with struggle and trauma in other people. And then they'll also learn based on what they already know. So people really underestimate what good things they're doing for themselves in their life and what awesome knowledge they already have. And so no one's going to come to this program without a foundation, but maybe they don't know what their foundation looks like. And so we're going to facilitate and create a space that allows them to really dive into this and learn some things. And it's not a clinical environment. It's going to be peer-based.
Awesome.
And though I've worked mostly with veterans and first responders in the past, I'm going to open this program to all demographics, socioeconomic status, race, religion, whatever your diversity is welcome in my program, because we want to help people learn how to celebrate that and say, you're different than me and that's okay. And by you being different, that doesn't mean that I'm bad. Right. So you liking the color red and thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread, and me loving the color blue and thinking it's the best thing from sliced bread. I'm not wrong that blue is the best color since sliced bread, just because you say it is. But sometimes, with larger topics especially, we feel like somebody who's just different than us is telling us with their own opinion that we're wrong.
Yes.
And
it's not being right or wrong. It's just being real.
When you're growing yourself, you start to understand that what other people think and say does matter, but it's not what defines you. It's not who you are. And through growth and awareness, you can determine better for yourself what your adventure looks like, what your journey looks like. So the first level of program is called I Don't Know, because when we don't know where we're going or we're a little lost, we say, I don't know. And so when you come to our class, it's going to be titled I Don't Know, and we're going to tell you, like, maybe you don't know these things.
Right.
Maybe you do know these things, but let's explore this together. And then the second kind of grouping is going to be I need help.
Right.
So, it's going to focus on struggle and trauma. And also, and I'm really excited for this, helping individuals. I'm going to bring in providers that can help individuals understand what mental health care is out there.
Absolutely, yeah.
And how to understand therapies, medication, things like that, like just on a baseline level, so that they know kind of where they're going. I mean, they use all these acronyms for different therapies. How do you know which one fits for you? Because CBT is not going to fit everyone.
Right.
EMDR is not going to fit everyone.
That's right.
And then the third grouping is I feel alone. So it's going to focus on how to help people grow their community in a healthy way.
Awesome.
And then we'll create a sphere that helps people learn how to share this stuff and pass it on.
So we'll do another video next year once all this gets going.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I'll leave all your contact information in there, so if they want to reach
Okay.
out to you at any point, have any questions, all that'll be in there.
Yay!
All right. Anything else you want to close with? Is there anything you haven't said or you want to just reiterate?
Oh my gosh. I could talk for days, you know me, like
Right.
It's never a simple conversation. But I want to let everyone that's watching know, and I say this all the time to people, that trying is succeeding. So just putting yourself out there, putting on your pants at the beginning of the day, feeding yourself a bowl of cereal, brushing your teeth, taking a walk down the street, saying hello to a stranger as you pass by them, all these things are trying. And through trying, eventually you'll be doing. But first you have to try, right? No baby walks. So I just want to remind you that trying is succeeding. And sometimes trying means lying in bed for the day because you just need to give yourself the extra rest. But just remember that trying is succeeding, and you are already living an incredible life. And I hope that you can continue to build on that.
Awesome.
So that's kind of...
All right. Thank you guys. Namaste.
Namaste.